Hey everybody, Steven here, and today doing a deeper dive on the Subnautica 2 trailer, along with some speculating that I want to do about things that we may see in the game. Now that trailer, when it came out, I made a video as quick as I could, and there was actually some things that I forgot was already announced. For instance, the fact that this will no longer be on the same planet as the first game, so we will not be revisiting 4546b. This is a completely new planet. Here I want to just look at some of the stills from the trailer, talk about some of the stuff from the description on the Steam listing for this, and then also just talk about what we know in terms of who's working on the project and other things that we may see with the game. Now, I won't be 100% following the sequencing of the trailer, but I do want to start here with this image, because this looks like the safe shallows of the first game. Here though, one of the things that I saw in Anthomnia's video is over to the right hand side, he points out that the structure kind of looks man-made. That's in the right hand corner. Now, when I look at another image that kind of highlights that a little bit, I don't know if that's 100% correct with this. I kind of get what he's seeing. I could also just see it being just a variation of what we're seeing with the coral on these kind of rock formations here. But with that being said, as something kind of degrades, I get what he's thinking here, which is that if there are like a past civilization's structures here, and this has kind of just been washed out and it's undersea now, that may be a reason for these characters to be here. So there's something in the story that could drive us coming to this planet. And before we move to the next image, I just want to point out, this thing looks incredible in terms of a still from this trailer. Here we're in Unreal Engine 5 now. I've talked about that in most of my videos on Subnautica 2, because the transition to that game engine, obviously we're going to get this massive increase in overall visual fidelity, but also the speed of development and what they can do in this engine I think is important as well, because there's a lot more that they can do at a faster pace, meaning I think we're going to see a lot more packed into this game because of that compared to the other games. Of course, that just follows suit. Of course, you want to make the next game, the follow-up game, even bigger and better, but using Unreal Engine 5 I think just exponentially increases how they can do that here. So I think we're going to see a tremendous amount of content in this game, but of course that follows suit. It's the second game, so we should see like bigger, better, more, all that stuff, but just the amount of content in this game, I think we're going to be blown away. Density of these biomes, how large these biomes are. We're looking at different vehicles, base building material, stuff that you can make for your character, upgrades to your character, the flora, the fauna, density of locations, stuff that you can find. Like, there's just so much they're going to pack into this because of the transition to the Unreal Engine, and I'm excited to see the first snippet of this that we're going to get once we get into early access. Because the other thing that I'm keeping in mind, because I'm going to show some stills that they released from the game, this should be in-game early build stills, and there's a huge amount of variation that we see between some of those images, which leads me to believe that we're going to have, with that first launch of early access, more content than I think we had going into the original Subnautica and Below Zero. I think we're going to have a very large chunk of content here to start with, which is really exciting. So with this still here, so dead center, that's, I believe, one of the things that was pointed out that looks a little bit more man-made with how it's stacked. I can see that, especially as you kind of look next to it and it kind of branches out. It looks like archways and windows. And then as you move a little bit more to the left, further in the background, it does look more like the outline of a building that is underwater, right? Again, the remnants of some type of structure that is man-made versus just something that would naturally form over time. Now, personally, I go back and forth on this because I do see what Anthomnia is talking about, that the outline there, it does look like a man-made structure. On the other hand, it does kind of still look like the coral. And the thing that leans me towards it being potentially more man-made is, again, we need a reason to come to this new planet. And so it could be something that drives the story forward here. So that's where I lean towards it, but also we don't know enough yet, so there could be a completely different reason for these characters coming to this planet. But another thing to point out with this is the fact that the character in this scene is actually being pulled by a current down below into this massive opening. So some other content creators that I've watched their videos, I believe it's Aussie, with his, points out like that current there. They wouldn't just show that for no reason, which is a very good point. So here, I think we're going to see, and again, this is the power of the Unreal Engine 5, the ability to integrate this where you can have currents that are pulling you or pushing you in certain directions. And that is something that is going to massively affect gameplay if this is in game. So this would be like a vortex, right? You could see it visually that the character is being pulled down into. So imagine just swimming along and all of a sudden you hit one of these and it pulls you into an area that you may not be able to escape. The first game had that like horror side to it where there was this very imminent presence of danger that you felt throughout the whole game. I think we're going to go back to this with certain aspects like this with the gameplay, where again, you could be going along and all of a sudden you're pulled down, you may not make it, you may drown. So it's gameplay aspects like this that I'm really excited to see because I think we're just scratching the surface. Now, backtracking a little bit here, we did get a good image of the new diving suit along with the oxygen tank and then the scanner. So in this scene, the main character is scanning something. We'll actually look at this because it ended up being a creature, but aesthetically looks very cool. You actually have neon lights on the suit now, which is really cool. But comparing this to previous suits, this to me looks like the all environment protective suit compared to any of the other suits here. Almost like a little bit of blend of the reinforced diving suit in terms of like some of the lines, but those are now the LED lights. Looking at the oxygen tank though, this does look to me like a high capacity oxygen tank. Interesting to note here too is that we have more glass, so you get to see more visually with the actual helmet here. And then in terms of how oxygen is being fed in, it's not from the front, it's from the back. And this would be the radiation suit for reference here. And if you're looking at the helmet, again, the tubes are in the front, but this one, they're feeding in from the back. So now we have, again, more visual space that we have now in the front of the helmet compared to the previous games, which I'm hoping that leads to something in game that we would notice here. And then looking at the oxygen tank that the character is using, it looks very similar to the ultra high capacity tank, but I'm going to showcase a still image that they released as well here in a little bit that does show this at a better angle. Now, right after the character is scanning what it thinks is just some coral reef or a plant, it actually starts to shift and move, and then you actually have this creature pop up. And so this massive crab, it seems friendly, it doesn't attack you immediately, and it's almost acting like a hermit crab in a sense because it's wearing that kind of shell, the coral on top of it, unless it's just growing on its back, which could be the case. But all the videos, everybody's saying like this is very reminiscent of the reef back from the first game, which had resources on its back that you could utilize. So it may be very similar to that, where there's certain resources that you could actually find on this creature that you do need in the game. And so for me, it kind of seems like a combination of the squid crab along with the sea trader, and then of course the reef back. Seems like we have a good kind of combo of all those in this massive creature. Now, looking at one of the images that the devs released as well, we have these creatures without something on its back, so there's no coral or anything like that. Size wise, I mean, they're still massive. It's hard to tell if it's the exact same size as the one that we were just looking at, so this could be a smaller version, maybe a juvenile. It would be cool to see multiple stages of different creatures, meaning we could have like the juvenile stage, the adult, the older stage, or hopefully a lot more creatures, because we did kind of get that with some creatures in the first game. In the second game, I mean, you have like the juvenile Sea Emperor from the first game, you had the baby snow stalkers from Below Zero, so hopefully we see more of that in the game. Not just a creature here or there, but a lot of the different creatures. Hopefully we do get to see that. With the crabs here, I would also hope that we would see maybe like these ones obviously looking different. They don't have anything on their back. Maybe that changes based off the biome. So the biome that they're in, their look, how they're trying to disguise themselves, things like that would change as well. Now, since I'm already on this image though, we do have some new fish that we see with what appears to be like 8 eyes on it. We also get some membrane in terms of the plant life that we see here, the purple one down by the crab. In the background on the left hand side, that looks like a vent. So we are seeing, kind of like in Subnautica Below Zero, some vents with the environment that are closer to the surface versus being very, very deep down. So we may have some thermal vents that we can actually utilize in game that would be of use earlier on in the game versus much later on towards kind of end game. But also just looking at the vehicle here, we have the tadpole, and this looks like a modular vehicle. So it looks like this is something that we can build upon, most likely turning it into, from what I'm seeing other people talk about and what I think is most likely going to be the case, some type of like prawn suit, like a mech type thing, but also maybe other things as well. I think maybe we could interface this and actually add it to a larger body that is more like the sea truck, or I don't know that they're going to have as big of a vehicle as like the Cyclops in this, but maybe we get something that's in between, like a Cyclops and like the sea truck or like the sea moth that we could utilize here. But making this modular would make a lot of sense because you have more options for what you could actually have this dock with or interface with versus, hey, you have to build this separate thing here and then this other separate thing and then this. You actually kind of have this one thing that can just dock and attach to all these different things that would make it a different vehicle completely, right? And so just looking at this thing, we have basically like a motor at the top on the back here. But then it also looks like we have propellers. You have one on either side and then one kind of on the middle bottom there. And I've heard some people say like those could be attachment points really for whatever this is going to interface and dock with. And I could see that, but to me it looks like there's literally like a propeller in there. So I think this is for helping with the directional movement. So you have like your main propeller on the very back, and then you have these to actually help with thrusting it in a particular direction. Now if you look at the side though, and I'm going to have a better image of this here in a minute, this is where you can actually see like, oh, there's actually a illuminated attachment point where it looks like you could really just attach some, I mean, arms if we wanted to use it with something like the prawn suit, but also maybe that literally just was what connects it into something else, like I was saying, that's more like the sea truck or like a mini Cyclops, something like that here as well. One last thing I want to cover before I do move on is the fact that this tadpole is really close to this crab creature, so most likely it is not aggressive. So I don't know that it would be that close without this thing trying to attack it. So to me it is more like the Sea Trader in that regard, but we won't know until we're actually playing the game, because it may have something where if you get like somewhat close, it's whatever, but if you get really, really close, it may have something where it tries to like push you or nudge you or maybe even like hit you away from it. Because that is one thing I've seen some people kind of talk about, but I don't know that it's been talked about enough, which is I think we're going to get a huge increase in creature complexity in terms of the things that they do, how they move, their behaviors, all those things with this game, not just the Unreal 5 game engine where we're seeing like this game looks gorgeous. We're going to get all that, but also I think we're going to get these other massive improvements to the game. Shifting back to the trailer though, once the character gets sucked down, kind of goes black, they wake up, you're getting the warning for oxygen on the HUD of the helmet here, and I think we may get more stuff like that in the game here, which is more information showing up kind of like on a HUD inside of the helmet. This scene I really like because we're going back to the scary elements of the first game. This is character wakes up, it is pitch black. I remember just diving down into those certain areas where it's just pitch black and how nerve-wracking that was. But this also signifies, where we have this other character come up, the fact that we will have multiplayer here. So I think a lot of people are really excited about that. As far as I know, that is a separate mode. So you can do single player still, or you can have up to 4 friends with you. I am curious to get more information on the multiplayer too, in terms of how that maybe changes the story if you're playing with 4 people, and how the behavior of the creatures maybe changes, or if there is a large impact on gameplay, especially if you're playing in survival mode, things like that. One of the other things to point out here though is the fact that on the dive suit we do have lighting, so that is illuminated, which I think is really, really cool. And I'm wondering if we can actually utilize that in certain dark environments where we don't really want a flashlight, because we kind of want to blend into the environment a little bit better, but we can still get a little bit of light from our diving suit. Now after that, we see the second player, they smile, they wave, and then we see this thing rise up behind the characters. And here, obviously it's a massive squid. You have the tentacles. It looks like it has little pinchers on the ends there. But looking at just the top here, Anthomnia mentioned something here that I thought was interesting, which is just looking at that, I think this is our hint that this is going to be one of the main highly intelligent creatures. So I know with Subnautica, we got some misdirection where, like, the Sea Emperor, it was kind of presented in a way that it seemed like this was going to be a very hostile creature towards us. It was something that we were going to have to avoid, to try to get away from, like to not be hurt by. And here I think we're getting the same thing. I think this may be a misdirection. This may be one of the very intelligent creatures that potentially helps us in the game. I could be completely wrong, because this creature does look very menacing. So this, I also just leaning the other way, like I could see going into these dark zones and it blends it with the background. You don't really notice it there, and then it literally like just comes out of nowhere and grabs you, and like you get that shake, that scare, like you did with the Reaper Leviathan. And so I want to lean that way too. So I go both directions, but I think this thing is highly intelligent, again, just based off this image right here. And part of me wants to lean more towards this being a very menacing creature because this image. So now we get a better picture and view of this. I'm going to show the cover art image that they did release here in a little bit, where you can see glowing eyes, but I want to zoom in on this because you're actually having the face of this kind of blocked out a little bit by these characters. And this is where, I mean, it just looks creepy because you can see the front like tentacles for its mouth. You look at the shape of it, it has more harsh lines. It's not super smooth here. I don't know, it just looks very, very scary. And that's where it's like, hey, if this thing blends into the background and then it comes out of nowhere and gets you, like I am hopeful for that. But again, I could also lean the other way and say, like, again, this is maybe a misdirection. Maybe it's very menacing looking, but it also is a creature that we find later in the game that is trying to help us uncover or solve whatever mystery that we have here on this new planet. And here, another still image, we get a decent view of the tentacles. Reminds me of Doc Ock from Spider-Man for whatever reason. And then here, this is the cover art for early access that you can find on Steam. So we get a really good view of this creature. I'm assuming this is a Leviathan. But here, we also get the 2 dots for the eyes. Very interesting. And then we also, just for the environment, get to see, it kind of looks like the Twisty Bridges, kinda, right? But the dark purple looks very different. So I'm assuming this environment, just a small snippet of what we would see very deep under the water surface, kind of like the Lost River or something like that here. Very, very like cool image. It just looks awesome because you get the 2 characters, you get a little snippet of the biome here, but then again, this main creature that looks very menacing, that I'm hoping the fact that we're seeing this right now, it may be there like right as early access launches. I've mentioned this, but I think we're going to get a lot of content in this early access compared to Subnautica and Below Zero. Like right off the bat, we're going to have a lot in game already. So now I want to shift over to the stills. So this is in game that they shared. We have a handful of images. So here, a lot going on. We're still in kind of like the shallows type area here. We have two creatures off to the right-hand side. There's technically a third and some other ones that you can kind of see, but we get a good look at these two on the right-hand side. Then the other character to the left-hand side, we get a good look at the diving suit here, as well as what I'm assuming again is more like a ultra high capacity oxygen tank. But the big thing that I think a lot of people's eyes are going to be drawn to is the fact that we have what they're calling, and this I got the information from, I believe it's Aussie, his channel, the Wake Maker, which is like handheld sea glides. So I'm hoping this is something that is representative of more options when it comes to what we can use for both regular vehicles and hand vehicles and tools and things like that that we may be utilizing here. I don't know that they would 100% get rid of the sea glide necessarily, but this may be another option that we have to traverse underwater with. Some things to note here, we have a battery per side here, so you're gonna have to keep up with those batteries. I'm wondering how fast this is as well. It does look like it has a good amount of speed to it. And so leaning into that notion a little bit here, maybe we have like the Sea Glide has a longer distance it can traverse before the batteries run out, and it's not as fast or agile. It's good in between. And then you have this, which is maybe the batteries don't last as long, or maybe they last longer. Maybe it's faster, maybe it's slower, maybe it has just more agility to it in terms of how much you can turn with speed and things like that compared to the Sea Glide. And again, I'm hoping that we have a bunch of other stuff that we just haven't even seen yet in regards to tools that really expands upon the stuff that we got in the first game and Below Zero. And I do want to note that this may just be a placeholder name. I don't know if this is going to be the official name for this device. But if you're looking at the listing on Steam, they have little snippets about the game. This one here, craft submersibles, tools, and bases. Survival depends on utilizing the right tools. Alongside basic items such as your scanner and flashlight, you'll find recipes for more advanced tools, equipment, and submersibles. Bases are more customizable with an overhauled building system. We have new tools to allow for greater adaptation to the world. Here, that bases are more customizable with an overhauled building system. I'm wondering here, in the other channels I've looked at, pointing out the same thing with the verbiage here, if we're going to get something that is more akin to what you see in other games like Ark or something like that, where it's like you make the components and then you actually build that the way you want it, versus being more limited where you're presented with these certain structures and ways to connect them together, but beyond that, you really don't have a high level amount of customization here. Here, I think we may get like certain structures that you will need or recipes for those, and then just a lot more freedom when it comes to the base that you're going to build. I'm really hopeful that we see that level, because that was one of the draws with the first game and the second game, is the cool bases that you could build with just the things that you had. If they open that up even more, where it's like, hey, you can really fully customize your base. You have like walls and the structures within the buildings that you may actually make, the platforms, like the lighting, all that stuff that you can fully customize. And I think that adds a high level of replayability with a game like this. I think a lot of people just loved that aspect of the first game and Below Zero. Here, if we get more in terms of the tools and the things that we get to actually utilize to build a base, along with the 4-player co-op, so now you can do it collectively with your friends, and we get something more akin to Ark, maybe not 100% like that, but just something that leans a little bit more towards that. We're going to see some really cool stuff from the community. Now, before we move on, I want to point out two things on this image last here. One, I believe on the bottom arrow, I think we're seeing an actual resource there. Like in the first game where you would find debris from the Aurora, that kind of looks like that. Not 100% sure, it just kind of stood out to me. Maybe wrong on that. The other one is I've heard a couple people point out in the far background, this thing back here may be something that is more like a man-made structure. So maybe crash ship, maybe an old structure that's just kind of decayed over time that's underwater. Not 100% sure. It's hard to tell. So may or may not. To me, it just kind of looks like it's just kind of more to do with the environment, like a cliff edge or something like that. But I can kind of see what people are talking about. And in this next still here, we have this very unique looking creature. We got two of them, right? And then we have a couple smaller ones in the background there. But here, I know Aussie was talking about this kind of reminds him of the Mesmer. I can kind of see that because that front area like fans out. Just looking at this, I'm very curious because you see the other one to the right-hand side. It's pulled back. So here it's not warding off or trying to protect itself or attacking or anything like that. I think this is a creature where if you get close, it's going to fan that out. I'm wondering if it like vibrates those things, right? Like vibrates or shakes or something like that. It is essentially making itself look bigger, which we see with animals that really do exist, like the frilled lizard here. So that's the first thing I thought of. Now, Alex Reese is the artist again here. So when we're looking at creature design, we're looking at Alex Reese's work. And I've been fortunate enough to interview him, and I did that for Below Zero. I will have a link for that interview. But we talked a lot about like his fascination with nature and the animals that we find on Earth. And so there's a lot of influence from the real things that we find on Earth in his artwork and his creature design. So that's again where I was just like immediately I thought of something like that, and just then it has to have a reason. He thinks through the whole process. Like here, that's where I'm kind of leaning towards. It probably is a mechanism for this to ward off something getting close to it. So it's kind of like a, hey, I'm going to warn you really quick, get away from me. And so that could potentially shake. Maybe it just fans out, but I think it will shake a little bit. It'll do something here. We also have a bunch of eyes on this creature, right? So it looks like there's three, potentially two next to those. So we have one dead center. We have the left, we have the right. There's one that kind of sits behind that may be something else that the creature uses to pick up on its surroundings. So maybe not quite an eye, maybe something else there, but very cool design here. And then we have these other smaller fish that kind of look like peepers in the background. So kind of still reminiscent of the other games. And then this does look like the Safe Shallows. I think Aussie even said that this was titled like Subnautica 2 Shallows. So kind of leaning towards that same aesthetic and vibe of the first game with the Safe Shallows here. But also just looking at like the God rays from the sunlight there, like all the cool stuff that they can do with Unreal Engine 5. The first thing I was drawn to was the hands, just how realistic they look in this image. Shifting over to the next one, this is a big one here, because if we're looking at the scanner specifically, so we're getting an alteration to the design, but we're also getting like an actual like HUD type image thing that pops up from that we didn't really have with the other ones. And I'm wondering what this information means. It kind of looks precursor to me, which when I started thinking about that, I was like, all right, we made it off the first planet. I wonder if this being post obviously is like, we've brought that information back to civilization, and now it's like, hey, what else is out there? And so these are exploration missions to see if they can find more of this technology. And with this, we've now integrated some of the information that we have on the precursor technology with our own technology, and we're utilizing it here. And then for the write-up for the game on Steam, we get this little tidbit here: study mysterious life forms. Uncover a rich world full of mysterious life forms, from the smallest fish to the largest leviathans. Scan creatures to learn more about them. Use your biosampler to take samples for study. As you learn more about this world, evolve your genetics to adapt your body for survival. This has been pointed out by a lot of other people, but this is huge because that is a cut thing from the first game. So we'll start here with the transfuser. The transfuser was a tool intended to sample DNA from life forms and then use this DNA in the centrifuge to create consumable items that would alter the player's or other creatures' attributes. I think we are now getting this back in game. Very excited. This was implemented, by the way, because I'm going to show part of this from just a video where I believe this is one of the devs showcasing this. Again, this ended up being cut, unfortunately, but this was something that was in the game. It just got cut, and I think that was due to time limitations. So here, we're going to look at this. You're going to sample the DNA of the reef back here. You just got it. Going to open up the PDA here. You have that sample. Now you can bring it back to the centrifuge at your base. With this, we also had other items as well that were cut that we may see coming back, which is really cool to see. So here you'll watch this finish out, right? Now we have the serum that we used. So serum reef back here, again, not implemented. And another item that wasn't was the specimen analyzer. The specimen analyzer is a machine that allows the player to analyze and combine DNA, creating a limited amount of life forms to use as companions. Each creature you can create using the specimen analyzer will assist you in different ways. I think we may be seeing some of this stuff, not all of it, but I think we may see some of this stuff implemented that I think was just cut due to time limitations. Here, we have more time for development, more resources. They're just further along with this as well. And I think that is partly due to the fact that we're working in Unreal Engine 5. It speeds things up, like I was saying, but also the resources that they have now since Krafton acquired them. And so here we just have an image, conceptual image here though, of the species analyzer. We also had the hydroponic chambers that weren't implemented in the game either. So I do believe we will see that in game. To what extent, I don't know. I think it will be far more than even what initially was planned for the first game. I think we're really going to see a lot of this stuff just expanded upon in this game. And there's one other thing that they have in the description on the Steam listing that makes me think it's not just geared towards creatures, it's actually geared towards you as well. And that's right here. A new world awaits alongside an all-new story. You are a pioneer traveling to a distant world, but something is amiss. The ship's AI insists you carry on the mission. This world is too dangerous for humans to survive, unless you change what it means to be human. What creatures, intelligent or otherwise, await your arrival. So again, we're looking at some DNA augmentation, but not just for these creatures, potentially for ourselves as well. And I wonder how much that actually will impact gameplay, because that would be another cool thing, is actually taking attributes from these creatures and then augmenting your character. So for instance, you maybe can survive off of less oxygen, so your oxygen tank provides even more duration underwater now. Maybe you can augment your eyesight, so there's certain things that you can see that normally you can't. Subtle things like that. I don't know, like massive gameplay changes, I don't think we would get that, but subtle things there would be really cool to see in game. And then zooming in on this creature here, very cool design. It looks fast, it looks agile. Noticing that the eyes are on the bottom side, not on the top side here, and then it has a really gnarly mouth that looks like it can do some damage. And to me, just based off location and kind of like, again, looking at it, looks like it's fast, it can do some damage. It kind of reminds me of the Stalker, not in the design itself, but more like, hey, this is going to be in the safe shallows for the most part. It's something that is fast, it's quick, it can get to, and it will be aggressive, it will cause some damage. And we have our last image now, and this one different than the other ones. I would assume we are very deep underwater at this point in obviously some type of cavern or cave system here, but we have thermal vents, so there's some heat going on, so we're getting deeper and deeper at this point. The creature here though, very crazy looking, very mean looking. I like the design, but it's actually one of the first like aggressive type creatures that we saw with this image right here. So when the devs actually released an image from Subnautica 2 here way back in February, so the game, like visually, not that this doesn't look good, but you can see how much improvement they've already made to this. This just looks very sparse compared to the images that we're getting now, but you can see that same creature is right here. So I'm wondering in terms of locations where we're gonna see this in different biomes, and maybe again, are they different in those other biomes? But going back to this image, We see here, again, it looks like it's actually coming at you. It looks like it's going to attack you. You have one in the background. So aggressive creatures here, but this just looks very tight quarters. And that's also certain things that I miss about the first game when you're going in certain areas and it's like, man, am I going to make it out of here? You feel that pressure of, are you going to make it, on top of these aggressive creatures trying to come after you? And then zooming in a little bit so we can see the creature in the background, we have a couple other fish that do look different, but the one right above this creature looks like a smaller version of it. So going back into like, maybe we see different stages of life for a lot of these creatures, which I think would be really cool. Let's see some like juvenile ones, again, some like just regular ones, and then some older ones, and depending upon where they're at in that life cycle, they may have different behavior, which I think would be awesome. Now, to finish out the video, there's some things I want to cover that I haven't seen too many other people talk about. That partly is just who is actually working on the game, because we do have Obraxis is back, we have Liam Tart working on the game, we have Ben Prunty doing the music again. With Below Zero, the music was on point. And then we have, again, I've mentioned this, Alex Reese doing all of the creature design for this. A big one no one's talking about as well, though, is the writer. Who is writing the story for this? And it is Seth Dickinson. Now, this is something he actually announced on his blog a while ago, but let's actually look at just kind of the books that he's done, but also the games, because that's very important. Now, in terms of when this was announced, it's not something that they've actually made a public announcement about, but he announced it on his blog May 24, 2022. So it's been a minute. With this, I actually remember covering this, and then I totally forgot. And I even reached out to Danya, the community manager, who also is still a part of the game. She does phenomenal. She is such a big help when it comes to content creators, but just the game itself and making sure that everything in the community is running smoothly. So shout out to Danya. But I actually forgot. I reached out. It's like, hey, has it been announced who's writing the script or the story for this? And she kind of pointed me in the general direction without telling me, and I found it again. I was like, holy smokes, I've already covered this. So it's been a minute, which is why I think a lot of people aren't really talking about it. Now, for his books, here's just some. He's actually been doing this for quite some time, but here's some references for his books. More specifically, the games, though. This is important. So we have Free Space 2, but in the middle there, Destiny the Taken King, Destiny 2 Forsaken. I mean, I think in terms of Destiny, and I am a huge Destiny fan, especially the Destiny 2 Forsaken storyline was one of their better ones. So he is the writer on that. So I think in terms of story, we are in very good hands here. I don't think for this game that we may 100% go back to the first game, which was essentially no dialogue from the character. I kind of lean towards that, and then I kind of think maybe not. Maybe we have some dialogue. We'll see here. I go back and forth on that. I want to hear from everybody. Do you want it so it's kind of like the first game, no dialogue, or not necessarily like the second game? Because I know a lot of people didn't like that. That was more dialogue heavy, but do you want something that's maybe in between, where we do have some dialogue out of the character, just maybe not as much? But overall story, I think we are in very, very good hands here. Very excited to see what Seth comes up with, the direction that he takes this story, the twists, the turns, the narration, like everything that we're going to get with this. Very excited to see, and I'm hoping to be really surprised and kind of thrown into certain directions that I wasn't expecting at all. Last thing to cover here, this was from February 8th when they made the first image post on the game. Early access, not intended for 2024. Obviously, we're going to get this in 2025. Game as service, they're basically saying they're going to continually support the game with updates. There isn't like a season pass, no battle passes, no anything like that. And then last, it's not multiplayer focused. Co-op will be an entirely optional way to play the game. You'll be able to enjoy it as a single player game though. So that is the intended purpose, single player, but then they are giving us what we've been asking for a long time, which is multiplayer. And so that is going to wrap this video up. I know this was a longer one. There was a lot that I wanted to talk about that I just didn't cover in that first kind of reaction video to the trailer. I also think there's probably a lot of stuff that I'm missing too. So if I am missing little tidbits in these images, in the trailer, that you guys are seeing, let me know in the comment section. I want to hear from everybody on this. And then for early access, I will be covering this the same way that I did for Below Zero and part of Subnautica, which is usually 1, 2, maybe even 3 videos a week, depending on how much is being pumped out into the game. So every time something significant is added, I will be making a video and covering that. So if you guys want to follow along for that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And then I don't really do live stream stuff too much, but maybe like the first day that we actually get the game in early access, I may try to do that as well. But if you guys like the video, hit the like button for me as it helps the channel out. And thanks again so much for watching this one, and I'll see you in the next video.